Welcome, Amanda, to the podcast. It's great to have you, one of our own Silver Linings therapists.
Thank you for having me.
So we will be talking about trauma today. So what is trauma?
It's interesting because I've been thinking about recently, reflecting on what trauma is, because I feel like trauma is very subjective to each individual. And I've noticed in therapy room that people often minimize their trauma because it makes it easier to deal with.
Yeah, I like this. I mean, I think the subjective part particularly, because often people compare, don't they? And there is a lot of things going on in the world. There's a lot of shocking things that we can experience. But if something affects you, it's genuine and it's valid.
Yeah, and it can lead to have a massive impact on something that happens, say, in childhood, can then lead on to have such a massive impact on you throughout your life, especially if it's not something that you've really noticed. If it's something that you've sort of always grown up with, having been through it, it can seem normal.
Yeah.
So, I think it is really difficult. And I would say that quite often in therapy, that is something that comes through from people that they've been through traumatic events that they don't believe are traumatic because they are not to them through lived experience.
Yeah. I think that's important as well. Obviously, as a therapist, we want to think, feel, relate through a client's eyes. It's in our training to do so, and also which is why it works, because we're non-biased, but we can see it and experience it as their frame of reference in therapy term, and kind of expanding that outward for people to recognize as well, because when someone does open up about something like this, sometimes there are things that are squashed, or you should be over that by now. Why are you still banging on about that? Why should we talk about this? It's in the past, let it go, get over it, all these kinds of comments. And this exactly is part of that, isn't it? And it normalizes it even more for someone that's already struggling. It's not something that you do let go either, is it? It's something you learn to live beside and learn to not let it have so much control over you, learn to rebuild the relationship with yourself, but let it go. It doesn't ever fully go.
No, I agree. I mean, trauma, you asked me what is trauma, and I suppose for me, and as you know, I work in grief as well, and for me, I think that trauma and loss go hand in hand.
Absolutely.
I think 9 times out of 10, there is an element of grief. It can be losing a job, being made redundant, a divorce. It doesn't, when people think of grief, they think of death, but and all of those events can be traumatic. Your parents getting divorced, moving school, moving house, it can be traumatic. Christmas.
Oh, yes.
Do you know what I mean? All of these events can be traumatic events. And if they make you feel certain emotions, anxiety, sadness, loneliness, that can be traumatic.
Yeah. How do you see it show up in adult life with clients that you're working with?
So many ways. I mean, self-confidence, lack of self-esteem, feeling worthless. I mean, I think they're probably the 3 key things I see time and time again. Or problems in relationships, because that they don't think that has had any impact. They don't understand quite often why they feel the way they do in a relationship. But then when we work backwards, we can often see there has been some sort of event that has then caused this going forwards.
Yeah. And classic hurt people, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So not that it's okay.
But... No, exactly. But I think that that's often the way that I see it coming up. Definitely the lack of confidence and the feeling worthless. 2 big things I've seen.
Yeah, I see a lot of this too. There's a lot of patterns actually in this. This is my main area of work, and there's a lot of things that do come up consistently around relationships. Key relationship with yourself, which people forget often too. Even stripping it back to your relationship with yourself being so bad that you self-love yourself, that you have to teach yourself that you're worthy of food again, and might be having to force yourself to eat and learn what's good for you again, and putting the heating on at home, and nourishing your body, and taking care of yourself. And self-care is not always like the pamper stuff, even though that comes into it as well. And even all of those layers and layers, when the self-loathing is that bad, it really does seep into everything, every core thing about you. And those beliefs that you kind of master when you're younger, if you've been brought up in, say, a childhood abuse kind of scenario, then the belief system that you learn at that time would be maybe inward, maybe outward. So it may be, I am unlovable, I am broken, I am not enough, I am too much, these kinds of things. Or you may go outward with it and it's the world's against me, I hate everyone. And what that does is, when it stirs up those core beliefs like that, it plays out in these relationships, exactly as you said. And you don't always see it until you strip everything back and look through layers and layers of shadows and different stuff coming into it. And when you function from those places, you just reinforce those beliefs. That's where the patterns come from. And over time, it does more and more and more damage until you're like, no, stop. Like, I need to work on myself here and rebuild all of those parts and dig into all of those bits and put the mosaic back together. And in turn, the self-worth, the relationships, they come in a bit better.
But it takes time. That's the thing. It's not an easy process, but it's a process that has to be completed to, gain some worth in yourself. When you look externally for other people to make you worthy, then what happens is you never feel worthy in yourself. One thing that's always worked for me is voice journaling. I voice journal because then I can listen back to it and I'm often amazed by what I hear.
Yeah. Oh, that's an interesting one. That goes deep, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Which I guess prompts me to think about like self-talk, because essentially what you're doing is externalizing your self-talk to then listen to yourself back. But we naturally do have that narrative running, don't we? Anyway, you can either be your worst critic or your best friend or both. And it's not always kind of controllable, but it is things that does affect all of this stuff. And if you've had an experience that's traumatic, it can be chaos in your head. You never know what's going on for someone.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, inner conflict is a real key word, I suppose, that I took out of what you just said. When you are trying to project one way, but internally is something different, that's really difficult. You know what I mean? Masking, I suppose. Always check on your happy friends. And you never know what's going on underneath unless you ask.
And although we are more open a lot more these days with stuff like this, it's not really something that you would just talk about at dinner, is it?
No.
Or a lot of this inner turmoil stuff is not just casual conversation. So it does need to be with a professional or with someone safe, with someone that really gets you, someone that really does listen and is patient and is gentle. And those people are sometimes difficult to find, especially if you're already struggling with stuff like this, because trust can be like massive and really be challenging for you to work through that. But yeah, it's really important to know your places and know your people.
Yeah, absolutely. And also why I've always found, when I've been through therapy, why I've always found it easier to speak to a therapist is you've got no concern about hurting them.
It's a really special bond, and I find it really hard to put that into words, actually, of how to describe as a therapist, because you know what you're doing. And people often ask me, do you care about your clients? I do, yeah. It's a very different bond because I'm not emotionally involved, even though I do care.
It is, and I think maybe part of it, or certainly it is for me, is because while they're bringing their authentic self, you're bringing your authentic self. And so you're gaining a connection between you.
In a sense of understanding. And I say to a lot of my clients too, actually, when you experience trauma, you almost speak a different language and experience a different reality. When I work with people who have experienced trauma, I personally have experienced certain things in my lifetime too, which I've shared on platforms. And it really does put you at a different level of connection in a completely different way. And that's not minimizing other people's stuff, because everyone's stuff's important and is valid, but it really does change the dynamic when you're working on these kinds of things.
I agree. I mean, I've also experienced trauma. So I've had these experiences with my own therapist where, you know, you gain that trust between you, because if you don't have that kind of trust, then you can't open yourself up in the way that you need to. And often what people bring to us, they've not ever spoken about.
Yeah.
You know, and so to trust somebody enough to be open about something that sometimes they feel very ashamed of or guilty about, or whatever it is they're feeling, it's very special.
Yeah.
Very special.
How do you work with some of this stuff when some of your clients come with an experience, or even anyone listening at home? What would be your go-tos, do you think, in how people can help themselves and work on some of these things we've spoken about, the relationship stuff, the self-loathing, the inner critic, the chatterbox, reinforcing those things?
So I suppose, first of all, I would, you know, work with them to look at what this inner critic is saying, whether you can actually hear it, because I'm not sure if people realise, but sometimes the inner critic can be so loud that you actually don't hear it anymore.
Yeah.
It becomes white noise. Challenge these thoughts and reflecting them back. I mean, a lot of what we do in the therapy room is reflecting people's words back to them, so that they can hear it. Again, I always recommend journaling or voice journaling, because half of the time a lot of problems come from it being stuck in a loop in your own mind and not having the opportunity or not feeling able to get them out.
Yeah. It does generally start in your mind, doesn't it? All of this stuff is kind of in here and goes outward, and those are kind of the first areas to really get stuck into and look at some of those narratives, listen to whose that voice is. It's not always your own. Yeah, I think I'm going to kind of just drop in the self-care element. I preach and preach and preach self-care to everyone possible. It's all over the socials. It's with every client. They'll probably all quote me somewhere in the world. All of my clients are someone else. And to you guys also, as you know, I preach self-care. I also practice what I preach. I just took myself out for dinner. But yeah, I think important to have that foundation, because without that, you can't get into the other stuff and get stuck into these kinds of thoughts, because it can unearth a lot of things. And sometimes people ask the question when I do assessments of, what if I can't handle it? I know it's going to get worse before it gets better. Not always, can be, but you've got to be prepared for that, and you've got to be looking after yourself for that. And exploring some of these thoughts can bring up other stuff, and it kind of go snowballing and ricochet outward as well. So yeah, there is an element of looking through all of those things once those foundations are in there.
Yeah, and I mean, something that I always talk to clients about is grounding, box breathing techniques. Sometimes we practice them, but also something that I really recommend is 5-minute meditation, because I'm not a massive one for meditation personally, but 5-minute meditation is brilliant, because it feels like it just clears your mind a bit, and everybody's got 5 minutes. Self-care is an interesting one, because a lot of people say to me, well, what is self-care? I can't just go up to the spa. And I say, no, self-care can literally be anything, but it's just something for you, something that you enjoy, something that relaxes you. For some people, that might be doing some admin or ticking a list. You know what I mean? Just something that brings you some peace. Is how I personally see self-care.
Yeah, self-care is a massive one. I do a whole session sometimes on this because of this question of what it is. There's actually a blog as well, if anyone wants to read on the website about what is self-care, because it changes, doesn't it? So my version will be very different from yours, and there's different levels and different layers of self-care. So there's the surface, your basic needs, the pamper stuff, that kind of stuff. There's boundaries, there's relationship stuff, there is communication. All of these things could be classed as self-care. You go deeper and deeper, you start to explore the other parts of yourself, even emotional self-care. I do a session sometimes around emotional self-care, and sometimes if you're feeling happy, for example, how can you extend that further? Or if you're feeling sad, what can you do that makes you feel happy? Or do you need to sit through that sadness and listen to a sad song that reminds you of an event that you lived 5 years ago? Like, these things are all self-care as well, and it really does change for everyone. And creativity is a massive way to explore your emotions and self-care, and a really good form of expression. I also use it a lot in therapy and use some creative techniques, but again, that's really customized to the person as well.
Yeah, that's it. I'm a great one for if I'm feeling a bit sad and I don't know why, I'll put on some sad songs. I've got a playlist of sad
Me
songs
too.
to make me cry.
Yeah.
And yeah, I fully agree with the creative side. I love to do Lego and
Mm.
crochet, you know what I mean? And it's just something to do with my hands and it clears my mind.
Yeah.
But as again, it's something else that's subjective.
Uh-huh. Yeah, absolutely. And I think the key thing is here as well, because something else I hear a lot of is I've done all my list of things and it's not working, but it's not about doing them once. It's about consistency and doing them even when you don't feel like them. So having a list of things, that I encourage clients to have a list of 10 sometimes of easy, accessible things. You don't have to have any resources for, you don't have to think about it. Having the list also, and on your fridge, on your phone, on your laptop, wherever you can see it, it puts it into your subconscious, because we process quicker when it's visual anyway. And when you don't have to think about it and it's accessible, you can then get to it a lot easier and consistently, because doing things once or twice is not going to work.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And another thing that comes up a lot, I find, in the room is anxiety. And again, I think this links very clearly in with trauma. Um, and I've personal experience with anxiety. I have generalized anxiety disorder and health anxiety. I've had it for over 25 years. And so it's always one quite close to my heart.
Yeah.
Because, you know, when you've experienced experiences similar, you know, you have that empathy, deep empathy, which we always do have anyway, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. I mean, there's a lot of things that spiral out of your system, isn't it? And it will work its way out until you do the work on yourself. I think there's an interesting point here. I'm not sure if you feel able to go into it, but a lot of people are curious as therapists. How do you work with something if you've experienced it yourself? And how do you then not be directive and talk about your own stuff? How do you keep it about the client? How would you answer some of that?
I have come up against it in the therapy room, and you know, sometimes it can be tough. But the best way that I have found is to remind myself, if I know that I've got a client coming in who has similar experiences to me, then again, I will, before the client comes in, do a lot of breathing and mentally ground myself, remind myself that this is their experience and not mine.
Mm-hmm.
If things do happen in the room that remind me, I will then put it to one side of my mind, my little compartment I've got here, take it to my own therapist, take it to supervision. But there have been occasions when a client's been talking to me and I've thought, oh, that hit a bit hard.
Mm-hmm.
And to be perfectly honest, I am perfectly honest and say, oh, I'm getting this feeling. I'm not sure if it's mine or if it's yours.
Mm-hmm.
And then we'll discuss it. But that's because I'm being authentic with them.
Yeah.
Because I can't ask them to be authentic with me if they're not going to get the same back.
Yeah.
And then generally, if that has ever happened, then we've acknowledged it. I can then take it, you know, move past it and take it onwards.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Thank you for that.
No,
very good reflection. I think this is all important to recognize, because I'm sure a lot of clients wonder about this, but of course we're human in a lot of this, and it is about having the awareness. A therapist that doesn't have awareness is dangerous. It's not about having everything in line. It's about having the awareness and working on your shit, basically, and all the time, and being committed to that, so that you can firstly commit to yourself, because that's ultimately important as well. Be able to work with clients from that unbiased and knowing that if something does come up for you, compartmentalizing. I think I've mentioned to you before, if you, I suppose this is one for the therapists if there's any listening, but if you sleep on it and it's still stirring up a lot for you, then it's likely your own rather than the client's. Whereas if it seems to ease and it's not had that emotional turmoil, then it's generally the client's, and you can go back to session knowing that it's not something from your own stuff that's diluting the session of their stuff.
Yeah, but I will say that having your own experiences as a therapist can also be really helpful in the therapy room, because, not that you have to be experienced in what they're bringing, but when you do, it adds another level of understanding and empathy, and and it can deepen the connection between you.
Yeah, it's that learned underneath language again, isn't it? Because not everything in the room is word. It's classic talking therapist, thank you, Sigmund Freud. However, the biggest moments I've had with my clients are beyond words. And I think that's why I struggle to describe that bond sometimes, because the biggest moments are in the silences, or when someone's cried in front of me who has been through something so traumatic and doesn't show emotion and is there feeling safe with me for that first time. And obviously I don't like watching people cry, but knowing that they're releasing and what they're getting from that, and the relationship between us, feeling that safe that they can get that.
Yeah, I think one of the biggest moments I've had numerous times is when I've said, I understand. And I've said it in a way, and my face tells them that I really do understand. And sometimes the relief that you get, that actually you're not alone in how you feel. And I know for me, throughout the years, feeling alone has been one of the hardest things. Feeling alone in how I feel inside, my mind. And that has definitely been one of the hardest things for me. And so I try and exhibit that to people. You are not alone, because it's scary.
Powerful words. You are not alone. I think a lot of people probably need to hear that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think everybody out there in the world has needed to hear that at some point. Because there's nothing more scary than feeling like you are on your own with this insurmountable thing. But you're not.
But do you think that we have these experiences and they are with us forever? Like we said earlier, it's not something you do just kind of get over and move on from. Do you think there is hope in having healthy relationships, looking after yourself, not having the traumatic experiences take over? Do you think there's a hopeful future for some of these people that have been through a lot of this stuff?
Absolutely, yeah. And I think this brings us back to loss again, you see. I think that's the thing when we go through a death, for instance. It's one of the biggest pains that you can feel. And at the beginning, you feel like you will never get over it, completely broken to pieces. And what we do over time is we glue those pieces back together. And, if we imagine it, I use visualization a lot. If you imagine it as a vase that you've broken, and you're slowly but surely gluing it back together, it won't look the same, but it'll still function. And that's how I see moving forward from a traumatic event, whatever that might be. It leaves its scars, but we also learn from it. And sometimes we don't learn healthy habits from it. And that's why, going through therapy is such a good thing, because what we do is we get the opportunity to relearn these things.
Unlearn, relearn.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, absolutely. There is a way forward. I talk a lot we talk about visualization, so that was one of them. The other one that I use is forest. I always think about a forest. I usually use it with grief, but it can be used for anything really. And I always describe it as a really dense, thick forest, and the path that you've got to take goes through it. There's another path, and it's sunny on that one, and you can walk around that if you want, but it'll only bring you back to exactly the same place. When you walk through this forest, you're going to get cut, you're going to get hurt, you're going to trip. But you know what? The further you walk, the better it gets. And that is how I see a lot of trauma response and a lot, loss and grief, all of those things. And I think what I always try to give to my clients is I say to them, I can't show you the way, but I can walk next to you.
Very true. Any good therapist helps a client find their own answers and is with them during that. And I hear that consistently. And yeah, all of the things that you're talking about here. And obviously, invested being one of silver linings on therapists. So it's nice to hear as well, even more. But yeah, for anyone out there, that's kind of a key thing to look for in a therapist if you're searching too. Okay. If we think about then, how do you think? So obviously we're coming from a lot of this stuff from a therapy angle and the things that we work with, the things that we see, the patterns, these kinds of things. So I'm thinking if we expand that out and think about if someone has a friend, a partner, another family member, or a colleague, anyone that they know that has been through something and the awareness is there of that thing, and how do we think that we can support people around us without jumping into being a therapist?
Yeah, so the key thing is just listen. Just be there. Just be there. And they might not want to talk. And if they don't want to talk, that's fine too. But just let them know that you're there, and show up. Show up for them. That might just be a text, how you doing? And don't expect them to message back. Acknowledge that they might not be in a place that they can do that at the moment. But if they let you, then just be there. If they want to talk, listen. If they don't, sit with them in silence.
Yeah.
That's the best advice that I can give, I think. Because at some point, they will open up. And if you have always been there and shown them that you will be, then most likely you'll be the person they open up to.
Yeah, I agree. When we know that someone is struggling, we want to jump in and rescue a lot of the time. And yeah, in our personal relationships, it's really easy to kind of get drawn in onto that. And when you're emotionally involved, it tangles it up a little bit more too. But being able to be patient and gentle and sit back and wait for that person to be ready. And again, it's not always words. It can be sending a cute picture, or if it's for me, a dog picture every time, please, thank you. So it really does depend. All really beautiful points. I think these are really important. And I think that when that person is ready, they will, recognize that you're being there. And first, you have to get over the hurdle of someone being there, actually, probably the first part of that. And being able to trust that person and being able to see that someone's being kind for no reason at all, just because they care about you. Seeing that as well can be really challenging and really try and make you shut it down and protect yourself and all of these other things.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's basically what we do. We listen. That is the first thing.
Yeah.
We can't ever truly rescue anybody. And it reminds me of a poster that actually really changed my life. Going through this, my training, and I found a poster that was things I can control and things I can't control. And it really changed things for me. It blew my mind. And I thought, wow, so I can't control what somebody else does, what they think, how they feel, their judgment, but I can control all of my choices and thoughts and judgments. And that really changed things for me. So, and I would say that that's a really good point in this case. If we're talking about somebody that doesn't want to or can't talk, you can't make them.
Yeah.
You can't make them trust you. You can't make them open up to you. All you can actually do is sit next to them and
I am
let them
here.
know that, yeah, that you are there and you're not going.
Yeah, and we are not expected to be mind readers, but we can have empathy and treat each other well. And even bringing back in hurt people, will heal people too. And you have a choice. You can be hurt so badly in whatever happens to you and hurt yourself and the world as a result from that. And if that's just human also, that's not a criticism or a judgment, but at some point you have a choice, and even in those early days you always have a choice, and the way that we treat people is a real reflection of ourselves a lot of the time. And when you do the work on yourself and take that accountability, it really does change things. And you don't have to be perfect either, and you don't have to be a healer or anything as such, but the more you work on yourself, the more it goes outward and affects all the areas in your life and the other people around you, and the influence that you have on others, the impact that you have on others.
Yeah, absolutely true. Yeah. I don't think I've ever learned so much about myself than before I was a therapist. And it just goes to show that we're always a work in progress.
Yeah, completely.
Always. Yeah.
Okay. Some really lovely points that we've discussed today, and I really hope that they help people and really get them reflecting and give them a little bit of hope, actually, because none of this stuff is nice, is it? It's all part of the endurance and resilience that we have to practice in this human experience that we have. I think it would be good to maybe just ask, what would be the words that you would like to say to someone who is in like that chaotic inner critic, self-loathing, hating the world, hurt person right now?
I think the words, you are not alone, I think. I'm here. I think that I suppose I'm speaking from my own experience,
Alone.
Yeah. I'm here.
Yeah. Someone to hold that turmoil that you're feeling with you, and yeah, it not be like used as a weapon or not be misunderstood. I mean, everyone essentially wants to be seen, heard, and validated, don't they? And
Exactly.
probably our biggest need of what helps with connection and that is emotion. But yeah, ultimately that's everyone's biggest need, isn't it?
Yeah, and to know that they're safe. To know that they're safe to be angry or upset or confused, conflicted. I think that it's really, really important that people know that you can be all of those things at once. Because I don't think that people realise it's okay to feel, happy but sad, or excited but confused. Sometimes we feel a multitude of things. And so sometimes just being able to validate, it's all right. It's okay for you to feel angry. It's okay for you to be sad. It's okay for you to feel all of those things at the moment.
Yeah.
Sometimes that is really powerful.
I'm going to bring in some DBT slightly there of the language, happy but sad. It's not one or the other, is it? We don't have to be happy but sad. We can be happy and sad at the same time. And you can use that actually in a lot, if anyone's listening, of interested in kind of DBT techniques. And you look at the language that you're using, you really start to pick up on, wow, I'm not speaking to myself very well. The wording that we use a lot of the time can be feeding some of those narratives and scripts that we have too.
Yeah, and also we often think that the anger and the guilt and the shame, we think of it as negative. We think of them as bad, and the happy, excited as good, and that's not true. Yeah. They're emotions. They don't have morals. They are emotions, and you are allowed to feel them. You have a right to feel them, and sometimes it's just finding somewhere safe, and that doesn't have to be in a therapy room. For me, it's walking around a field with the dogs, and or with a trusted friend or colleague. But it's having the space to feel them, to acknowledge them, because often we don't. Because the one thing we can be sure of is that emotions will not stay repressed.
Very, very true. Very true. And I think this is a really interesting point to bring up, actually. I'm going to extend that a little bit further, because a lot of the time people will say things like, what's the point in dragging all that up? Why do I want to feel that? I'll just distract. I'll avoid this. And don't get me wrong, those things have purpose too. And I also use distraction, and I also avoid things. I compartmentalize. I'm a therapist. I do those things as well. However, it's important to have the space for them. If you don't, what happens? It will spiral out into how you look after yourself, how you are with other people, your romantic relationships. It will spiral into everything that you do, whether you want it to or not. You don't get a choice. So if you do the work, you reduce that risk, and you also then get to have the awareness of how you are outwards.
Yeah, I always describe it as a bottle of pop that you just keep shaking and shaking and shaking, and when you take that lid off, it will explode. It's, they won't be silenced forever.
Yeah.
So sometimes just being able to, something that was said a lot to me was, you need to sit with your emotions, and I was like, what does that even mean? I feel like I sit in constant inner turmoil. So, I do sit with them.
Point.
But what I've realised is that it's not the sitting with them, it's acknowledging and giving myself permission to actually feel them. And that is a lot harder than you think, because it feels uncomfortable, especially if you have in some way been using methods to distract yourself from them over a long period of time. So it's difficult, but it's doable. I'm doing it, you know what I mean?
Yeah. There's sitting and there's becoming, isn't there? I think that's the difference. The inner turmoil, I would probably say, is where you become and it fully takes over and consumes, whereas the sitting with emotion is where you do acknowledge it and you learn from it and you feel it to its core, but not in a way where it changes you or who you are.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So a safe space is such a powerful thing to have. Whatever that may be for you, try and find your safe space, because it's really important for you to have somewhere that you feel seen, heard, and listened to.
I agree. I think that is a very good one to bring it in on, and it also goes with our process, learn, evolve, all of these things. Thank you for coming and chatting about some